There are encounters that strike the soul like lightning on starless nights, bonds so intense they feel predestined, as if an invisible tie binds us to someone who, though absent, remains present in every thought, in every silence. When such a presence departs, the emptiness is not only emotional, it is archetypal. Absence reverberates loudly, echoing through the collective unconscious and touching the deepest fibers of the psyche. But what if that person was never meant to leave? What if separation is an illusion, and these persistent signs are invitations to reflection and transformation? Today, we'll explore how what feel like emotional hauntings can actually be expressions of the unconscious, crying out for integration and meaning. If you have ever felt someone left but never truly left you, write in the comments, "I recognize the signs." From the standpoint of Carl Jung's analytical psychology, what marks us deeply does not vanish, it transforms. When someone impacts our journey in a visceral way, they no longer belong solely to the external world. They take up residence in our inner world as a symbol charged with psychic energy. In these cases, separation does not necessarily signal an end, but a displacement. The image of the other shifts into the unconscious, where it gains autonomy and manifests through signs, dreams, intuitions, and emotional repetitions. Jung described this phenomenon in terms of projection. We cast onto others parts of ourselves we haven't yet acknowledged. When that other departs, the projection doesn't immediately dissolve. It persists, demanding integration. These haunting signs are not mere nostalgic memories, but symbolic messages pointing to something still in need of understanding and assimilation. If the lost figure represented aspects of our own shadow, their absence may trigger a profound individuation process, the path of self-realization Jung described. In this context, the pain of loss becomes the impetus that pushes us inward, forcing a confrontation with forgotten or denied parts of our psyche. The image of the other thus becomes the key to rediscovering ourselves. Moreover, the archetypes of anima and animus, the feminine and masculine aspects within each person, can be activated by these experiences. Someone who seemed made for us may actually have been reflecting an inner dimension that still needs cultivation. Therefore, those insistent signs are not emotional punishments, but symbolic invitations to inner growth and reconciliation with what still pulses in the unseen. There is a mysterious force that leads us to certain encounters as if preordained by something greater than ourselves. When someone enters our life and seems to touch our being in its entirety, chances are that what we see in that person goes far beyond who they really are. Jung called this projection the psychic phenomenon in which unconscious parts of ourselves, qualities, desires, wounds, potentials, are cast onto the other. When we love someone intensely, we are often falling in love with what we have yet to recognize within ourselves. The other becomes a mirror of the soul, an unwitting carrier of repressed contents that burst forth with overwhelming force. This process is deeply unconscious. At first, the encounter feels magical, transcendent, as if fate itself were at work. There is a symbolic fusion. The boundary between self and other dissolves, and we weave an idealized narrative around the relationship. Yet when that relationship ends, or when the other leaves abruptly, the projection shatters. And the pain that emerges is not only about the person's absence, but about the loss of the image they carried for us. We stand before a psychic void. The projection returns inward and compels us to confront what was hidden behind it. In that moment, many feel the person is still here, even though they have gone. This sensation is real on the psychic level. The internalized figure remains alive in the unconscious, insisting on manifesting in thoughts, memories, and feelings that never seem to cease. What haunts us is not just absence, but the unintegrated psychic content that figure represented. When projections are unconscious, they blind us to both the other and ourselves. We don't see the person as they are, but as we want or fear them to be. It's a mirror game in which we project not only our ideals and deficiencies, but also our shadows, everything we reject in ourselves, and that, when it appears in the other, sparks enchantment or repulsion. Idealized love often carries this dual aspect, the desire for union and the unconscious refusal to see the other as a separate being with flaws and limits. Jung warned that the only way to make this process transformative is to bring into consciousness what we have projected. That requires courage. Rather than remaining fixated on the other's absence, the path is to ask, what exactly did that person activate in me? Which aspects of my soul did they reflect? Which part of my identity was hidden behind that bond? In this frame, loss becomes a portal. The end of a relationship, painful as it is, offers the opportunity to reclaim the missing parts of ourselves. When we stop seeking in the other what we lack, we can begin the process of individuation, a more integrated identity in which our wholeness no longer depends on someone external. What was once a mirror turns into a window into our own depths. Such processes are usually met with great resistance. The ego, attached to the idealized image of the relationship, refuses to admit it was projecting. It would rather feed on the pain of absence than face its own inner void. But the truth is, until the projection is recognized, it will repeat itself in other relationships, other faces, other stories. Liberation does not come from forgetting the other, but from understanding what they symbolized in our journey. The encounter with the unconscious then is not just a consequence of loss, it is a demand. The person who left remains a symbolic presence, a part of us not yet fully embraced. Only by acknowledging this truth can we stop being haunted by absence and begin to become whole. When an emotional bond is so intense that it leaves marks on the soul, its presence does not end with physical departure. Even after someone has gone, certain signs seem to insist on reappearing, as if an invisible part of reality continues calling for what was lived. These signs, recurring dreams, surprising synchronicities, sensations of presence and repetitive symbols, are not just expressions of grief, but communications from the unconscious. Jung understood these phenomena as the deep psyche's attempt to restore inner wholeness, shaken by separation. Dreams are one of the most direct languages of the unconscious. When someone leaves us, it's common for that person to begin appearing frequently in our dreams. Often the dream figure does not literally represent the individual, but a part of ourselves they symbolized. The repetition of such dreams is no accident. It points to emotional content still unassimilated. Something within us cries out for integration, for meaning, for elaboration. Jung saw dreams as a symbolic theater in which our psyche stages dilemmas, desires, and conflicts we cannot face consciously. If a lost figure keeps reappearing in dreams, it may indicate that psychic ties remain active, emotional fields stay open, and lessons remain unfinished. Ignoring these dreams is to miss the chance to listen to one's own soul in its healing movement. Beyond dreams, there are synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that defy rational explanation yet carry deep subjective value. It's when you think of someone and immediately hear a song linked to them, or when you repeatedly see a name, an image, a number tied to that story. For Jung, these events are not random. They reveal a connection between inner and outer worlds, showing that something significant is unfolding, even if the ego cannot comprehend it. These synchronicities serve as mirrors of the soul, indicating emotional or symbolic content on the verge of emerging. They often give us goosebumps, move us emotionally, or freeze us in place. And although they may seem like signs from the universe, they are also reflections of the psyche's depth, striving to rebalance the part wounded by loss. The persistence of these signs should neither be feared nor ignored. They call for listening, contemplation, and interpretation. There is also a hard-to-describe sensation many know, the feeling that the person is still nearby, not in a literal sense, but as a hovering presence, an energy that lingers. This experience is common when the bond was strong and laden with unconscious projections. The sensed presence is actually an internal aspect still in process. It is neither hallucination nor delusion, but a subtle perception that the experience has not fully concluded within us. When these signs persist, it is because the unconscious is inviting us to delve deeper into our lived story. Something needs understanding, a cycle needs closure, a part of us needs rescuing. Ignoring these calls can lead to repeating patterns, emotional stagnation, and a persistent sense of incompleteness. Jung said the soul speaks through symbols. When we do not listen consciously, it sends us images, coincidences, and inexplicable experiences to capture our attention. The more we resist, the more intense these signs may become. But if we open ourselves to their language, we can access precious insights about who we are, what we are avoiding, and what needs transformation. So if you feel haunted by memories, signs, or presences, it may not be because something external seeks to disturb you, but because something internal seeks to heal you. The psyche does not want you to return to the past, but to understand what it still represents in your inner construction. The call is not to relive the pain, but to integrate what still cries out for meaning. And the key to that integration may lie in the courage to listen to these signs with an awake heart. Few pains run as deep as that of a love left unresolved. When an emotional bond breaks without resolution, what remains is not only absence, but an entanglement of unconscious feelings that defy time and reason. The sense that something isn't finished can last years, even decades, not by rational insistence, but because an internal process was interrupted. To Jung, this unelaborated wound feeds directly into the shadow, the sum of everything we reject, deny, or forget within ourselves. And when love is denied, unacknowledged, or abruptly ended, it descends into the shadow as a latent psychic force that will continue to manifest until integrated. Psychic grief, unlike conscious mourning, is silent and persistent. It expresses itself not only in tears but in emotional blockages, repetitive patterns, extreme idealizations, or displaced anger. When we don't allow ourselves to feel the pain of loss, it becomes part of the shadow, acting from the depths of the unconscious. The refusal to let go often isn't a choice, but a reflection of a part of ourselves that cannot accept absence because the other represented something essential, a dream, a possibility, a fragment of identity not yet recognized. In this context, unresolved love becomes a psychological ghost. It infiltrates future relationships, sabotaging us unconsciously. We seek to recapture that energy in new faces, but never manage to relive what was lived. That happens because we are not actually seeking the other, but the part of ourselves that was activated by that encounter. And until we bring that part into the light of consciousness, we remain trapped in a cycle of repetition. Jung believed the unconscious always strives for wholeness. If an important part of the psyche was invested in that relationship, the unconscious will remind us of it constantly, through dreams, sudden memories, inexplicable longing, disproportionate emotions. These symptoms are not emotional illnesses, but expressions of an interrupted individuation process. The psyche wants us to complete the cycle, to acknowledge the loss, to feel the pain to its end so we can become more whole. But the ego, afraid of suffering, does everything to avoid this plunge. We create narratives, idealizations, accusations, distortions. We convince ourselves that the person will come back, that it was all their fault, or that we can move on without touching what really broke us. This defense mechanism prevents the shadow from surfacing, but also blocks healing. The pain relegated to the unconscious becomes bitterness, coldness, anxiety, rigidity. It masquerades as strength, but is actually prison. Integrating the shadow of unresolved love begins with the courage to stop blaming the other and ourselves. It requires humility to admit something wasn't finished and still hurts. It demands that we stop searching for answers outside and turn inward to what that person symbolized in our psychic journey. Perhaps they represented freedom or security or the chance to be someone we'd never been. Maybe they awakened a love for parts of ourselves that had been dormant. By recognizing this, we cease to be victims of absence and become protagonists of transformation. The shadow integrates not through denial but through acceptance. When we accept that the story touched us deeply, that there was beauty and pain, that something was awakened in us, even if it ended, we take a step toward liberation. The image of the other ceases to be a burden and transforms into a symbol, and psychic grief finds its end not in forgetting, but in reconciling with what was lived. Freeing oneself from unresolved love does not mean stopping loving, but reframing what that love represented. It means welcoming the shadow generated by loss, listening to what it has to say, and then bringing it into the light of consciousness. Only then can we cease to be haunted by memories and begin to walk with them as part of who we have become. There comes a silent, powerful moment when pain ceases to imprison us and becomes our teacher. This turning point does not occur suddenly, nor merely as a function of time. It is the fruit of a deep inner process in which what was once wound begins to transform into wisdom. In Jungian psychology, this moment marks the shift from emotional fixation to individuation, the process of becoming who one truly is. When lost love is embraced, understood, and reintegrated, it does not disappear, but transmutes into inner strength. Many believe that overcoming someone means forgetting, erasing, closing the door. But that is an illusion, fueled by the ego, which fears revisiting what caused suffering. Jung teaches that true healing does not lie in forgetting, but in symbolically integrating the experience. The figure of the one who left remains alive within us, not to torture us, but to guide us toward aspects yet to emerge. What we loved in the other, when seen with awareness, reveals what is ready to be born in our own being. This is the turning point, the moment we stop looking at the past with regret and begin to draw a new narrative from it. The person who once seemed irreplaceable no longer occupies center stage. They transform into a symbol, a personal archetype representing something greater, an awakening, a transition, a call. In that instant, the bond ceases to be a prison and becomes a bridge. Jung spoke of the importance of dialoguing with complexes, emotional nuclei that carry memories, affections, and traumas. When a relationship becomes an active complex, it seizes us entirely, dictating thoughts and behaviors. But as we become conscious of that complex, it loses its power. The energy trapped in the past returns to the present, and with that liberated energy, we can transform pain into creation, attachment into freedom, and longing into inward direction. Integration also involves recognizing the qualities the other awakened in us. Perhaps that love revealed our capacity for devotion, our sensitivity, our emotional potency, our power to transform. When not integrated, those qualities tend to vanish with the other's absence. But when we realize those aspects already existed within us, we begin to reclaim them, not as something dependent on the bond, but as legitimate parts of our identity. In this process, there is a symbolic birth. The person who emerges after integrating lost love is no longer the same. They bear the scar, but also the glow of one who crossed the fire of loss and found meaning. Love, then, was not in vain. It fulfilled its function of awakening what was asleep, teaching what needed to be learned, revealing what was hidden, and therefore, even in absence, it remains sacred. This is not about romanticizing pain, but acknowledging its transformative power. Jung shows us that every suffering contains a seed of evolution, provided we are willing to dive into darkness and trust the light that may emerge. Integrating lost love is a rite of passage. It separates us from emotional naivete and leads us to a deeper, effective maturity. We stop expecting the other to complete us and begin seeking completeness within ourselves. At this point, the memory of the other may still linger, but it no longer hurts. It becomes part of the symbolic tapestry of our life, a thread that helped weave who we are. There is no longer a need for answers, for return, for reenactment. There is only gratitude for what was and reverence for what it became. And then the energy once devoted to longing can be channeled into creating, loving anew, serving the world, expanding. When lost love transforms into inner strength, we are enveloped by a strange peace. We no longer fight the signs, nor hide from memories. They are part of us, echoes of a process that has fulfilled its purpose. And finally, we understand, the person we thought impossible to forget did not come to stay, but to awaken us. There are absences that do not dissolve with time, because what left was not just a person, it was a mirror of the soul, a call from the unconscious, a symbolic passage to inner transformation. Throughout this journey, we have seen how bonds that mark us deeply remain alive within us, not to imprison us, but to reveal what still needs to be seen, felt, and integrated. The persistent signs, the returning dreams, the soul-stirring coincidences, all are the unconscious speaking, and when we listen attentively, we realize that what seemed a haunting was, in fact, a chance for healing. Lost love can transform into inner strength, silent wisdom, emotional freedom, but that is only possible when we stop fleeing from pain and accept traversing it with courage and awareness. The person who seemed impossible to forget may have come only to reconnect you with who you truly are. If this journey has touched you in some way, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep receiving soul-illuminating content. And be sure to watch the video suggested on the screen. It may be the next step on your path of transformation.